Happy Friday. Hot day in Washington. I think it's in its 80s, and I heard it's going up to 90. Apologies for this Band-Aid. I had a very minor surgery, although I'll have a scar that may make me look like a gang member, which evidently is enough to get you deported nowadays. So apologies if I'm looking a little shabby. Just a quick couple of minutes today because it's really, really busy here.
It's going up to 90.
Washington.
Apologies for this Band-Aid.
Sorry, let me turn off the feedback there. All right, a couple of the big things. Well, the big news, I guess, is the coverage today of the Irish DPC, Data Protection Authority, decision, or draft decision at least. I don't think we have the full detail yet, or the announcement of the decision around TikTok, the investigation, as I think folks are aware, that TikTok was moving data to China. TikTok has spent a lot of time and energy localizing in the last, well, more recent time, but evidently for some period of time, was indeed transferring data to China, or actually, turns out Chinese employees in China were remotely accessing data, some data that was stored in Singapore and in the US, actually, of interest. And obviously, data about people in Ireland and I guess elsewhere in Europe. This was a decision that went through the EDPB. And they did have standard contractual clauses in place, but as we know, the clauses have to reliably show that there's very strong guarantees that foreign intelligence, foreign law enforcement cannot get to the data. And the analysis by the DPC was quite different than the analysis from the TikTok team. And we'll look forward to seeing the decision, but it does detail different laws in China that mandate access. Huge fine. TikTok's response is, well, you didn't really take into account that we've solved this. This is old news, but of course, DPC is able to take a look at the time period that they were investigating, including, I guess, some, surprise discovery that there was actually some data that TikTok disclosed in the course of the investigation that was transferred and on servers in China. One interesting thing to note is that this is really one of the few decisions other than transfers to the US. A lot of us based in US have sort of said, you're so worried about transfers to the US, and obviously that's a concern, but what about Russia? What about China? What about, perhaps clear, more adversarial situations? It is true that some of the Nordic countries took action, but no fine, I think, when Yandex was moving data to Russia, but don't think there was a public fine around that other than, I think, order of some sort preventing the data flows. The other interesting thing, of course, is one of these catch-22s. The SCCs obviously here were not going to work no matter what, given the law in China, or maybe magical super technical measures that could have been put in place that would have guaranteed no Chinese access, which we don't think is feasible at the moment. But just a reminder that in terms of if it's an issue of remote access, not transferring data, but remote access, the European Commission has told us that the SCCs are not actually suitable and that they will be working on such SCCs. Now, the EDPB does consider remote access to be a transfer. The EC does not. Well, the EDPB gets to decide, not the EC, but the EC obviously has a lead role with drafting these contracts and, setting them up. And then the EDPB's got to, assent to it and all that. But technically, at least according to the, creator of the standard clauses, they're not actually even suitable for the use that we're telling companies to use them for, well, in the end, your regulator is the one with the final word on this. But just a matter of confusion that frustrates those of us who like things to make sense. What else is interesting to mention? Well, we had a really good post. I'll call your attention. I think I reshared it in my feed, and Gabriela Zanfa Fortuna, our global lead, shared it, where we compare the law in Korea around AI to the EU AI Act. Korea is an important jurisdiction with a sophisticated regulator, but also a regulator and a country that's been focused on trying to be a little more pragmatic around AI, trying to be an AI champion, and one that is adequate in its data protection law. So maybe some lessons for us in the US, some lessons for our friends in Europe as well. One interesting thing that I didn't appreciate is that the Korean authority can propose legislation, and they have proposed an amendment to their law to allow the use of data for a secondary purpose for AI under sort of a legitimate interest type basis for research and for AI, including commercial. So I thought that's helpful, given that it is indeed challenging, to see the views of some of the DPAs in Europe, where sensitive data clearly used to train models, clearly necessary to train models. Can't train a model without sensitive data. You exclude the sensitive data, it'll be wrong, dumb, biased. And it should answer questions on health-related issues, because people are using it for that. And so if one's going to exclude, again, obviously medical data ought not to be in there unless it's a specially trained, tool for medical use. But a lot of health advice online, a lot of health data that might be personal and sensitive, and the challenge of not having a basis to use data like that in Europe is a big problem. Maybe there are technical answers here, but it's interesting to see the Koreans certainly recognize that they need a new legal basis and to move that forward. And we're monitoring that. It might be in the next couple of months. Other notes. Well, a lot of attention about the Google cookies decision, that Google's not going to eliminate, block, or eliminate third-party cookies. Those of us who know that we are in a mobile world nowadays right away said, well, what does that mean for the GAID, the Google Advertising Identifier? Obviously, you saw the competition decision recently against Apple around their ATT, the prompt that users see, and the criticism that the way it was implemented was not fair to other companies who had a harder time seeking users' consent than Apple. So what about the Google Ad ID? I think this seems to make it very unlikely, the competition decisions, the cookie decision, that ID is going to go away or change in a significant way either. Google didn't address that. But I think those of us following this are going to make that assumption. I gave a little bit of a heads up that we had a big HTech project, and take a look at my feed. We announced it thanks to our colleagues in the academic world and our donor at the Alfred Sloan Foundation. But if you want to be involved, supported, or engaged in some way, do be in touch. We're going to be taking a look at all the different technologies that are being proposed for supporting seniors, for supporting caregivers. We will have a big problem in this country and in many countries around the world where the population is becoming elderly, not enough caregivers. How is technology, how is AI going to play a role? Very excited about this future-looking project that I think is going to be societally important. What are the policy issues? What are the economics? What are the consumer issues? Speaking of new tech, the Orb is launching, this other Sam Altman company, one of Altman's other major priorities, company. He spends evidently a day a week, which is going to provide a world ID that is going to be proof of humanity. Altman's view is that there are going to be bots and AI tools and AI agents, and we're going to need some way to prove we are alive, particularly services that don't authenticate you. Like you can be an anonymous Redditor, you can be anonymous on Discord, but they do need to know you're not a bot. They do need to kick you off and not let you back on. And so some of those tools already use the World ID. Obviously some controversy here. It's a science fiction-y looking thing. You get crypto if you cooperate. Regulators around the world have pushed back. Brazil, for instance, Brazil is of the view that although the privacy pieces may be handled right, the notion of paying people to participate in this, to allow their irises to be scanned, their faces detected, is just not allowed under Brazilian law. I think it's about $20, which is a lot of money in a lot of countries. Others have been debating the privacy specifics. There is a lot of interesting work there. I think the pushback from many critics is like, do you really need a biometric, an iris scan as like a mechanism for this? Do we really need this? Because it's emerging. I do think Altman is right that we are going to need something like proof of humanity, for better or worse. But we aren't used to being asked for this yet, so it can be a bit remote in terms of like, do we really need it? They've certainly done some thoughtful things. The data does not go to their servers. It stays on your phone. It's deleted. The photo is deleted after you are scanned. Once you're awarded this ID that has proven that you are an authenticated human. I'm looking at it a bit more closely. When people jump on something, I kind of want to look a little harder. And sometimes, want to be counterintuitive on these things. Well, let's see how it's received now that it's out in the US. It's been out in a number of countries. They've got a lot of documentation. Open sourced is certainly a good step. Different universities who are actually the holders, so some bad actors can take it over and change the rules. It's an interesting time. Today, just me for a couple of minutes, but next week I'll be joined by a wonderful colleague from Sidley, and we will talk about California maybe changing the wiretapping statute that every company's been sued and has led to all these cookie banners. I hate cookie banners. There's got to be a right away. I don't want to be clicking on cookie banners all day. And I know companies need and want that data. So can we figure out a better way to manage this? Anyway, the wiretapping statute is clearly not the way regulators intended to regulate this. They're passing privacy laws very specifically intended to regulate this. It's not wiretapping. May or may not be a good privacy measure to use, to not use, to track, to not track. It ain't wiretapping. That's not what the law was intended to cover. And all these suits that just are sucking up everyone's time are not the right path forward. So I do hope California does that. The following week, Arvind Narayanan, one of the academics who I certainly look to for his careful thinking, author of AI Snake Oil, which is not a highly skeptical book. He's got his skepticism about AI, but he's also deeply aware of the benefits and, is a user. But, points out the parameters of what we need to be thinking. But Arvind and one of his academic colleagues has a new line of work out. Eventually it'll be a book, but he's done a lot of essays and so forth. You can see it on his Substack or just look at Arvind's homepage at Princeton. And it's AI as normal technology. And what does he mean by that? It's super interesting. Do take a look, and I will be discussing that with him in 2 weeks. Consider reading in advance. Heads up, we've updated our conformity assessment guide document we published with OneTrust because we want it out there for all who want it. again, look at my feed, look at Gabriella's feed. I think it's a useful tool. This is a new and different thing for a lot of us, required obviously by the EU AI Act. And take a look. I think we did a really nice chart and an overview. I guess we have our first privacy law of recent times at the federal level in the US, the Take It Down Act. A lot of advocates, people worried about images. You're not supposed to say revenge porn, although I do see people using the term a lot, and I know people get that. But non-consensual image sharing, non-consensual intimate images is the proper way to talk about it. And Congress has passed it. There are penalties if companies don't, upon request, take down that information quickly enough, and have to have processes in place. Other advocates, including some who really work on this issue, think that there are problems with the law, that it can be abused, and there's been some controversy around that. But Melania Trump supported it. That gave it an important push at the congressional level, and obviously there is a real harm. So we hope it will end up being a success, and if tweaks are needed, because it is abused in some way by people who take things that, request takedowns. Unlike the DMCA, there are some protections there that some might have wanted. I think that's it for today. There's more going on, but it's a hectic and busy day. Please do join me next week, and we'll talk about the amendments hopefully coming to the SIPA law in California the following week, to chat with Arvind and get into what does it mean to try to treat AI as a normal technology. Really thoughtful line of work. Have a good, happy Friday, and stay safe, everybody.